Hi everyone, my name is Sabrina Allaire, and today I'm presenting Chapter 1 from our textbook, Essential of Human Behavior, Integrating Person, Environment, and the Life course by Elizabeth D. Hutchins. Chapter 1 is titled Human Behavior, a Multidimensional Approach, and this chapter is very important because it introduces the main way social workers understand people and their behavior, rather than focusing only on individual choices or personality traits. This chapter explains that human behavior is shaped by many forces working together. These include personal characteristics, environmental conditions, historical context, and time. This perspective becomes the foundation for everything else we learn in this course. The chapter begins with case study which focuses on Joshua, a young man who is forced to flee his home because of civil war in Congo and later resettled in the United States. Joshua's story helps us understand why social workers must use a person-environment perspective. His experiences cannot be understood without considering war, violence, displacement, immigration systems, family separation, trauma, and cultural adjustment. This case reminds us that behavior is not just about what a person does, but also what they have lived through and what systems they are navigating. This leads directly into the purpose of social work. While, according to the chapter, social work is committed to promoting human well-being while advancing social, racial, economic, and environmental justice. Social workers focus on both individual and collective behaviors, meaning that they work with individuals, families, groups, organizations, communities, and even social movements. The goal is not only to help people cope, but also to address the systems that create inequality and harm. One of the core ideas in Chapter 1 is the multidimensional approach to human behavior. Human behavior is described as multi-determined, which means it is influenced by multiple factors at the same time. The chapter identifies three major dimensions that social workers must consider together: the person, the environment, and time. First, the chapter discusses the personal dimensions of human behavior. Hutchins uses a biopsychological approach, which includes biological, psychological, social, and spiritual factors. Biological factors include genetics, physical health, illness, and how the body responds to stress. For example, chronic illness, injury, or lack of sleep can affect mood, concentration, and emotional regulation. Psychological factors includes emotions, mental health, personality, coping skills, and trauma history. Experiences such as abuse, loss, or prolonged stress can shape how people respond to situations later in life. Someone may appear withdrawn, anxious, or reactive, not because of who they are, but because of what they have experienced. Social and spiritual factors include relationships, values, beliefs, cultures, and sources of meaning. For many people, spirituality, religion, and personal values provide strength and guidance during difficult times. These dimensions remind social workers that behavior is deeply connected to identities and lived experience. The next main focus of Chapter 1 is the environment. Hutchins builds on Bronbrenner's ecological systems theory to explain how different layers of environment influence human behavior. These environments range from close relationships such as family and peers to broader systems like schools, workplaces, social services, culture, and political institutions. The lecture emphasizes a funnel approach to understanding environment. This approach shows how large systems such as history, colonialism, racism, and gender inequality shape communities. families, and individuals. For example, Joshua's experience is shaped not only by his family, but by global conflict, immigration policy, and racialized systems of power. This helps social workers understand how oppression and privilege affects life chances. Time is the third major dimension discussed in Chapter 1. The time dimension includes linear time, historical era, and chronological age. Human behavior is shaped by when these events occur in a person's life and by the historical period they lived in. Experiences such as war, migration, or discrimination can have long-term effects depending on what happened. The chapter also introduces the idea of time orientation, which refers to whether people are more focused on the past, present, or future. Trauma can lead to past negative or present focused orientations, while stability and opportunity can support future-oriented thinking. Understanding time orientation helps social workers better support planning, goal setting, and healing. Chapter 1 places strong emphasis on advancing human rights and social, racial, economical, and environmental justice. Hutchins discusses globalization and how global inequalities shape migration, labor, and access to resources. The chapter also introduces the distinction between equality, equity, and justice. Equality treats everyone the same. Equity recognizes different needs, and justice focuses on changing systems so barriers no longer exist. The chapter also addresses anti-oppressive and anti-racist practice. Social workers must understand how oppression operates through institutions and social structures. Concepts such as white privilege, intersectionality, and diversity are used to show how power and identity influence lived experience. This perspective challenges social workers to reflect on their own social location and avoid reinforcing harmful systems. Another important section of Chapter 1 focuses on knowing and doing. Hutchinson explains the difference between knowing about a case and knowing how to act in practice. Social workers need knowledge of the case, knowledge of themselves, and knowledge of values and ethics. This includes understanding one's thinking patterns, emotions, bias, and professional responsibilities. Ethical practice requires reflection, self-regulation, and accountability. The chapter also introduces scientific knowledge, theory, and research as tools for social work practice. Theory helps organize complex situations, while research provides evidence that informs decisions. Hutchins emphasized critical thinking, noting that bias can exist in theory, research, and practice. Social workers must carefully evaluate information rather than accepting it at face value. Chapter 1 concludes with implications for social work practice. Social workers engage with clients, access needs, intervene using appropriate strategies, and evaluate outcomes. Practice includes prevention and advocacy. Throughout all these steps, social workers consider the interaction between person, environment, and time. In summary, Chapter 1 teaches that human behavior is multidimensional and shaped by personal characteristics. Environmental systems, historical context, and time. The chapter emphasizes justice, critical thinking, and ethical responsibility as central to social work. Understanding this framework allows social workers to support individuals and communities in ways that are informed, compassionate, and socially responsible. That concludes my Chapter 1 presentation. Thank you so much for listening.